Good morning. We indeed have a special privilege and honor this morning of welcoming Mayor Levar Stoney to the St. Christopher's campus. It was about 1 year ago that I first met Mayor Stoney in my office, and in the course of our conversation, I asked him bluntly, Mayor Stoney, would you consider coming and speaking in our upper school chapel? And he said he would, and Mayor Stoney, I want to thank you for honoring that promise and also for being with us just 4 months ago. You all will recall we were graced to have both Mayor Stoney as well as Reggie Gordon from the Office of Community Wealth Building talking to us about their charge, their mission here in the city of Richmond, and particularly so as we celebrated the life and legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King. My job here this morning is just to sort of set the ground rules and provide some context and framework for how our discussion will flow this morning. And just in speaking with the mayor, he wants this to be a discussion. He's going to open with a few brief remarks, and we're going to take about 10 to 12 minutes of Q&A. So students, as I introduce the mayor here in a moment, I want you all to be thinking about what questions you might have for the mayor. And those questions could be of a personal nature. You can ask about his upbringing and what led him to this position, this moment of his life as mayor of our city. They can be more professional in nature about his charge, his priorities, the work that he has set out to do in leading our city. When we move to Q&A, I would ask that we allow our boys to ask questions. So students will have you ask 3 or 4 questions, and then any faculty members or adults here in the room, you're welcome to ask questions as well. But let's let our boys lead the way during Q&A. I'm going to begin with just a very brief history on the role of mayor in the city of Richmond. It's been 240 years now of mayoral leadership in Richmond, going back to 1782. Our first mayor, who was appointed by city leaders, and then continuing to Mayor Stoney today. He was elected by popular vote of the people of Richmond in the fall of 2016. Of the 80 mayors in the course of our history, 19 have been elected by popular vote, including Mayor Stoney and his 2 immediate predecessors. 61 of our mayors have been appointed by city officials. Now, that 240-year span of mayors here in Richmond has obviously encompassed dramatic change, not only in our city, but our Commonwealth, our nation, and our world. Consider for a moment that the city of Richmond has grown from a modest population of 4,000 residents back in the late 1700s, now to a dynamic urban center, population of around 250,000 residents, and a metro area encompassing about 1.3 million residents. On December 31st, 2016, when Levar Stoney was sworn in as mayor of Richmond, he became the youngest mayor ever to serve our city. He was raised in Virginia by his grandmother and by his father, who was a janitor. Mayor Stoney is a product of Virginia public schools. He grew up on free and reduced lunch and was the first in his family to graduate with a high school diploma. He went on to graduate university from James Madison University before moving to Richmond, where he began his career in public service. He rose through the ranks from first being a fellow in then Governor Mark Warner's office to eventually becoming the first African-American Secretary of the Commonwealth of Virginia. He was the youngest member of Governor Terry McAuliffe's cabinet. As Secretary, he led the largest and oldest, most public-facing office of the governor's cabinet, and he was the driving force behind transforming the process that restores civil and voting rights. Under his leadership, state government was made more efficient, and rights were restored to more than 18,000 disenfranchised Virginians. That's more than the past 7 administrations combined. Mayor Stoney has initiated a number of long-term improvement projects aimed at building one Richmond, a phrase he uses quite often. As he promised during his campaign, Mayor Stoney asked VCU's Wilder School of Government and Public Affairs to conduct a performance review of the city. With the results of that review, Richmond is poised to increase and improve city services. Under his leadership, the city has already filled 11,000 potholes in just 6 months. His first budget included a record-breaking investment in Richmond's public school students, showing a commitment to our city's youth. The education compact between the school board, the city council, the mayor's office, and key community stakeholders such as teachers and administrators is poised to tackle obstacles that block Richmond children from reaching their full potential. He has also created the Monument Avenue Commission, which, along with citizen input, will determine the best way to tell the full story of Richmond's turbulent history. Since the people of Richmond elected Mayor Stoney, Richmond has been named the #2 top place that millennials are moving by Time magazine. It has been named a top 25 best place to live by U.S. News and World Report. Southern Living named Richmond one of the South's best cities, and the Richmond Times-Dispatch recognized Mayor Stoney as the 2016 Person of the Year. In June of 2017, he was named a Politico Rising Star. The numbers, not just the accolades, forecast a bright future for the city of Richmond under Mayor Stoney's leadership. In the last fiscal year alone, his administration has helped create 2,400 new jobs and also attracted 37 new businesses to the Richmond area. Will you please join me in welcoming Mayor Levar Stoney?
Well, good morning, everyone. As Mr. Leckie said, I will be having more of a discussion this time around, but I want to talk about what I believe is the charge of this administration during my tenure as mayor. I believe our job in its entirety is to realize the promise of our great city. And you heard some of the history of our city from its founding, the settlement by William Byrd. This was a place of opportunity. And as a city, we need to lean into our good and also embrace the bad, good, bad, and the ugly. Though we were founded as a place of opportunity, it was not an opportunity for some who came over here as enslaved Africans. And then we became a bustling city. And this was the beacon on the hill for those who lived in rural enclaves in Brunswick County and Emporia, Lunenburg. Richmond is the place for opportunity. It's where I want to be. African Americans moved in, raised their families here. We saw changes over that time. We experienced white flight. There were those who had no place else to go, and so they chose to live and raise their families here. When asked the other day at a cocktail party, give me one word that describes Richmond, the word I chose was resilient. This is a resilient city. Through the good, the bad, and the ugly, we have more than survived. We're going to become a better place to raise one's family and to also achieve one's dream. This is a place of opportunity. That no matter who you are, what color your skin, how much money you may have in your bank account, who you choose to love and who you pray to, that you can live out your God-given talents right here in 60 square miles. My job as an administration is to promise that this city was settled on. It's extended to everyone, no matter what neighborhood you live in. Did you have the same God-given right to rise in this city? And eventually, it's my hope that you can choose to raise your family here, do business here. That is, at the crux, what we've been chosen to do. But government can't do it alone. That's why we would not be the city we are here today if it wasn't for contributions from our philanthropic community, our generosity of our academic community, the generosity of those in the private sector, in our business community, but also the resilience of those who've seen the ups and the downs, the peaks and the valleys, the ebbs and the flows of our city. This is why I visit every school. This is why I walk every neighborhood, because I want them to know that this job just doesn't involve your government. It also involves you. And so with that, I love having a discussion about the future of our city, where we are now and where we're headed.
Let's open it up to students. And gentlemen, if you would please just raise your hand, stand, introduce yourself, and if you would, tell the mayor where you live. I think about half of you live here in the city, the other half in one of our surrounding counties, so I think it'd be helpful for him to know with whom he's speaking. So, questions?
I also have a correction earlier. You said 11,000 potholes, 26,000 potholes last year. But
Update your website.
I have to update our website, but obviously no one's counting how many potholes we're filling, but 26,000, 1,600 alleys.
Student questions. Right here. LB.
I'm LB. I'm from the south side. I live in Philippians. I was just wondering, what can the student body at St. Chris and other schools do to help affect the city directly?
When I think about our city, when I stated that we are a generous community, and I think some believe that generosity sometimes comes from how many dollars you can contribute to a project or how much money you can give in charity. But also, I think folks recognize here in the city that your time is also a treasure. And spending your time and giving back to our community, whether it's community cleanups or getting involved in parts of our city that some of our most vulnerable live, is very, very important. I remember I was at the Martin Luther King preschool over there by where MLK Middle School is. And there was one young woman who was volunteering from VCU. And I had to ask the question, where are all your other friends? When there's pre-K students who need to be read to, or if there's visits and mentoring going on in some of our communities in the East End. That is an excellent way, I think, that St. Christopher's can give back, and I know the record already of you all giving back too. I would never underestimate faces here showing up in other parts of our city that normally don't have access to the sort of resources that we have here at St. Christopher's. And your contributions there will go a very, very long way.
Questions? Go ahead. Stand up, please.
I'm Jaden. I live in Chesterfield, and I just wanted to know, what are you going to do to help improve some of the stakes of our public schools?
So public education is, if there's a part of my job that I wake up and I'm just like itching to get at every single morning, it's tackling our schools. In other cities around the country, you all may have studied this, that the mayor, let's say in a place like New York or in Washington, D.C., the mayor not only chooses the police chief and the fire chief, he also chooses the superintendent of schools as well. In Richmond, we have a school board who does that job. 9 elected officials who are responsible for the selection of a superintendent. My job is more, I play more of a fiscal role in allocating the budget to Richmond Public Schools. However, what comes with that role is influence. And early on, even as a candidate, I chose that the job of mayor is not to sit on the sidelines when it comes to public education, but is to be in the game, to be in the arena. And we've done that to probably more extent, I think, than any mayor before us. Not only do I visit every school in the city, I also try to bridge the gap between our friends in the philanthropic community to help us with some of our needs. So whether that means every high schooler in Richmond Public School now will receive a tablet to help close the achievement gap and the homework gap, or the fact now that 20,000 students in Richmond Public Schools will also receive free vision screenings and eyeglasses as well, to championing the investment of $150 million in the construction of new schools. That's just part of my role. I'm not in charge of what's going on in the classroom. That's the responsibility of the superintendent, who has my full, unadulterated support. But my job is also to tackle their time outside the classroom. 80% of the time of a child is spent outside the classroom. And that's why we've leaned into what we call the whole child approach. That means, what do we do with the children, with children after the bell rings? And for me, the number one part of my agenda currently is investment in out-of-school time. What a child does after school between the hours of 3 and 6. In my current budget, my budget proposal, I've recommended roughly $1 million towards expanding out-of-school time, high-quality out-of-school time here in the city, working with organizations like the YMCA, YWCA, Boys and Girls Club, Next Up, organizations you all may have heard of, working with us to expand and create a network of quality academic enrichment after the bell. So $1 million towards that, but this year as well, we're going to expand hours at some of our community centers as well to keep our kids off the streets in the summertime and after school. So now community centers around the city close at 7 o'clock. I'm contributing roughly $630,000 to expanding those hours to 11 o'clock in the evening, so there's a safe place for our kids around the city to be after school. Those are just some of the ways that the administration can play a role in impacting a child's life. But I will say this. The Commonwealth of Virginia, if you look at a chart over the last decade, has sent fewer and fewer dollars to the city of Richmond, a city that has high needs, while more and more dollars go to places like Fairfax County and Loudoun County. It's because of their high enrollment. And Richmond's enrollment in the public schools has been somewhat flat. However, also the formula that allocates these dollars also look at Richmond as a wealthy city because of some of the sort of tall buildings you see downtown and the wealth here we have in the west end of our city. However, if you look at our footprint downtown, whether it's the Library of Virginia, the state capitol, VCU's campus, the city does not recoup any dollars for those buildings. Real estate taxes. They are all tax exempt. So in a normal city, that's not the capital, we would be collecting real estate taxes from those sort of dwellings, buildings. Instead, the city receives no taxes for that. And we had worked out a deal years and decades ago that the state would pay us what they call a payment in lieu of taxes. But we receive essentially $0 when it comes to that. So I do believe there's a responsibility of the Commonwealth of Virginia to play a role in supporting cities with very, very high needs and high poverty. 40% of the children in the city live under the poverty line. However, I've seen the Commonwealth recede into the background when it comes to the investment in public education. And not just public education, also their investment in higher education has also disappeared. Tuition and some of the mandated fees have led to a 72% increase in the cost of higher education in the Commonwealth of Virginia since 2007. When I entered college in 2000, tuition was roughly $5,000. Now tuition is $13,000 on average in the Commonwealth of Virginia. We are now in the bottom 10 in the United States of America in terms of how much the state contributes and how much the consumer, the student, contributes to their education. So we are going backwards, even though we have one of the best higher ed and education systems in the country. I just believe that government should do a better job in stepping up.
Another student question. How about a senior? Jens.
I'm Jens. I was in Short Pump. So going off of school funding, I know there's a proposed cigarette tax, and I was curious what you think about that, because I understand that the schools could use more funding, but at the same time, those taxes they create a very heavy burden on the poor.
That's right.
What you're thinking.
That's right. I champion the $1.50 increase on the prepared meals tax in the city. That will provide $9 million a year in direct funding to a special reserve fund that will help us leverage into investing $150 million in the new schools. So kids will be able to walk into new schools in the city of Richmond, 2 or 3 new schools in the fall of 2020. I chose that revenue stream because it is a stable and reliable stream of funding for bonding and for borrowing, to paying back their debt. However, I said publicly that I was not for using the cigarette tax as a stream to fund construction or borrowing from banks because it's not reliable. Year after year, reports show that it's a declining revenue stream. However, I'm open to the cigarette tax being used for the general fund. And that will be up to the city council. I know that bill's that legislation is before the city council. We are the only city in the Commonwealth of Virginia that does not have a cigarette tax. And some would say that's because we are the home of Philip Morris, the largest tobacco manufacturer in the United States of America, and Altria is right outside the city limits. However, I will say this. There's no reason why we should not be open to all revenue streams. I've been open to the real estate tax. I just don't believe that's a reliable. I don't think that's the right taxing stream for this moment right now, particularly as a growing city. The city council has this legislation before them. I asked them to be thorough in their approach. I championed a tax earlier this year. This one will be the responsibility of the city council, and I don't know what they're going to do, but I'm open to it.
Time for one more question, either an adult or a student.
I'm from New Richmond. What would you like to see in the city in like 5 or 10 years? What are the biggest things you would like to see?
Well, first, number one, I want us to build new schools, right? Number two, I want to see our performance in our schools. It can't just be about bricks and mortar. I want to see the performance and the accreditation of our schools increase. Superintendent Jason Cameras has his hope in 5 years we can have all the schools accredited, and I want to join him in that approach. Additionally, I want us to see us, if we choose not to raise taxes on real estate, on all the property owners in the city, we have to expand our tax base. And that means all the empty lots that we may have downtown, there has to be a building there of some sort. And so that's why I've championed the redevelopment of parts of downtown around the Coliseum. And so we can create a new neighborhood down there that could be a tax generator. Additionally, we have open parcels along the boulevard as well, near the Diamond, that also need to be developed. I want to see that used as a tax generator. Additionally, though, as we roll into 2023 with $300 million plus available to the city for our debt capacity, I want to see us make a concerted and intentional effort to remake public housing in this city. We're a city that we warehouse our poorest and our weakest in the corners of our city. And what does it say about a city that 20-year or just 4 miles away, the life expectancy is 20 years lower than those who may live in Westover Hills? We got to do a better job at that. So if in my time as mayor we can get those projects started, I would call that a successful tenure.
You all please thank me, or excuse me, join me in thanking thank me.
Thank you.
Thank the mayor.
Thank you. Thank you.